Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's 10:30. The room's completely packed. I like it. Thank you for just covering all the 500 spaces here. Appreciate it. We're going to be beginning right now. Okay, the doors are closed. Nobody can get out. Okay, great. I'm Juan. I'm the EVP of Corp Dev at Wemade. I work with third-party developers, publishers, and anyone generally who's interested in working with us, working on our chain, trying to onboard their products to our platform. This morning, I'm going to be talking a little about some of the lessons and some of the mistakes that we've learned after launching the games, the 25 web games here, the 25 Web3 games, yes. To be completely fair, when I started preparing for this presentation, I was pretty sure we were going to have 25 games that were launched, but unfortunately, we were only able to launch 24, so we're one short of the mark. So if anybody has any complaints, just say something now, and I'll step off the stage because I'm unqualified. Okay, so no big issues there, so I'll go ahead. Okay. So my goal for this session is that each and every one of you, after you finish hearing me speaking, you'll go back thinking that you've understood Web3 a little better, and that if you're a game developer, you want to go back to your studio and say, hey, I want to think about making my game into a Web3 game for my upcoming title. So that's what I want you to think. And also, I want you to leave here thinking, hey, man, that Juan guy was pretty good up there. And so that's my other personal goal. Okay, so a little about myself. I've been in the gaming industry roughly about 25 years, so I guess I'm an OG. I started my career out in Nexon about 25 years ago, so I was there for about 10 years. And so during the 10 years I was there, I saw a lot of things. I learned a lot of things, but the two things that really stood out for me was this. So when I first interned at Nexon in 1996, we were a studio. We had 13 people, and we were making this game called The Kingdom of the Winds. And The Kingdom of the Winds was this game here. Does anybody recognize this game? Anybody played this game? Yes, the older people. Anybody know the English name of this game? We serviced this from our Sunnyvale office for about 8 years. No? There's $50 in it for you if you remember the name of the English version. No? Okay, well, all right, I guess you guys are not that old. So by the way, it was called Nexus TK. And so when we first launched this game in Korea in 1996, for you to play a game, you needed to buy a CD-ROM. That was the only way. You paid $20, $25. I think StarCraft was about $20 back then. And so, but when we launched in 96, we didn't do the CD-ROM thing. It was an online download, probably one of the first of its kind. And so what we did in this game was you'd log on, dial-up modem. You pay about roughly, I'd say, a dime a minute kind of thing. So that's how we started. So instead of paying for $20, $30 up front, you'd pay, if you played an hour a month, you'd pay for that hour. If you paid 30 hours, you'd pay for that 30 hours. That didn't really work out well because a lot of people really had fun playing this game. And so when their bill for that month came out to be $100 or $200, parents and kids were not happy. So we came up with different ways to pay. And so this was something that I thought was interesting. So what we did with The Kingdom of the Winds was we charged, instead of per minute, we had like a 5-hour prepaid subscription plan. We also created the monthly subscription plan. And then back in Korea, we had internet cafes, and we started charging by the IP. So there's different ways that we started paying for content. And there's another game which brought microtransactions. I guess everybody calls it free-to-play now. And this game used to be, it's called Quiz. It's an online game where you have anywhere from 7 to 8 people on the same screen, maximum 30 battling each other out. So you've got the little alligators down there. You all start at the same level. If you guess wrong, you go down. If you guess right, you go up. And if you're the last one standing, I guess it's Quiz Battle Royale, then you win. This game actually started out as a subscription game. And so it was, I think, about maybe $10 a month. And when it launched in 2000, we had about 10,000 CCUs. Back then, 10,000 was a pretty good number, so it was a pretty well-known, everybody knew this game. And I think we did about $20,000 a month in revenue back then, and it wasn't bad. It paid for the team's development costs, but it wasn't making a ton of money. So what we did back then was, well, let's try to go microtransaction on this. So as you can see on the screen on the left, you have these avatars, you have the skins, you have the hairdos, you have the sunglasses. And so we put this model and we switched to the microtransaction model. And one fall morning, after we switched to this version, we waited. A couple minutes passed, tens of minutes, nothing happened. And so we felt, this microtransaction model failed. It's not working because we didn't see any microtransacting happening. Little did we know that an hour or so later from that time, we would get a call from Korea Telecom saying, hey, our payment servers crashed. We can't process any of the payments because they weren't anticipating that level of people buying buying in-game items. So we learned that afternoon, like, okay, I guess we did pretty well. We made a lot more than the $20,000 in the first day. The first month, we did about, I think it was about $2 million, 10 times the revenue just going a microtransaction. And at that point in time, we also knew that, hey, the more users we had playing our games, the better revenue we'd make. So we got rid of the subscription model. We went free to play all the way. And all the new games afterwards from Nexon have been free to play. And as a note, the concurrent numbers back then was from 10,000. We brought it all the way up to 70,000 within a couple of months of just going free to play. Revenue tenfold, user base, concurrent numbers were sevenfold, but user base was at least 15, 20-fold. So, I think it was a business model that really worked. The reason I'm talking about this is that both of these things happened because there was a change in technology. It wasn't that somebody came up with a new idea for something. It was that online connectivity, meaning that you can have games that were connected to the internet. That technology enabled these new types of business model. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I feel that blockchain will do similar things for our industry. It's not there yet. It took, when we started in '96, we went microtransaction in 2000. When MapleStory came out to the US, it was like 2005 or six-ish. And I was working at the US office for a couple of years. Microtransaction, free to play or pay to win, there were other words for it, but generally it wasn't widely accepted. A lot of devs thought, hey, this is not right. You're destroying gameplay. There's things that you're not supposed to be doing. And I think a lot of it's gotten better. It took a long time, I'd say 15, 20 years for the general industry to understand. And now you still have, I don't know how much console games cost now, like what, 60, 70, 80 bucks? But forms of microtransaction have permeated through the gaming industry. You've got skins, you've got DLCs, you've got all these different things, I think, that are derivatives of those microtransaction models, which was enabled by online connectivity, which we'll talk about how I think blockchain will change the way gaming will be in the future. Okay, enough about Nexon. I'm going to talk about Wemade right now. Wemade who, Wemade what? A lot of you guys might have not heard about Wemade, so I'll talk a little about Wemade. That's our headquarters back in Korea. We're not a 2-year-old early mover, want to get lucky team selling NFTs as a quick get-rich scheme kind of company. We've been around for 20 years. We've been around for about 20 years. Some recent articles about us working with the New York Times. Yes, and we literally bet the farm on blockchain. This is Henry, my boss, on Forbes. And this is last year when Microsoft made an investment in us. So, we're not doing something for the short term. We've been in business for over 20 years, and we see ourselves doing business for another 20 years. We're a public company in Korea, market cap. We've got a couple listed companies, but total 1.5 to 2 billion, and we've got about 1,700 people in the company. So 1,700 people, that's a lot of people. And what do? I think about 4 or 5 years ago, we did a lot of game development. We started out making PC games, mobile games, the general games, all online games. But in 2018, we made an investment in an internal team doing blockchain technology. And little did we know that we would see the benefit of that investment grow exponentially. Not because we did anything with our coin, but because we saw the future of what this technology could be. And so out of the 1,700 people, half of us still develop just regular games. I mean, they develop games so that they're fun games. The rest of the company, the other 800-900 people, we do blockchain. We think about blockchain. We eat blockchain. We sleep blockchain. That's all we do. It's like, what do you mean, do blockchain? It's very wide. Like, do we have our own tokens? Do we have our own mainnet? Do we develop the games? Do we sell NFTs? Are we listed? And the answer to all those questions is yes, we do all of that. And there's so many things that we do as a company that I can't talk about everything. But in regards to this session, these are some of the pertinent things that we're doing. So we have a platform called remixplay.com. And on this site, this is our portal where we bring Web 2 games to life on the Web 3 space. This is a screenshot from yesterday. I think this morning you can log into it right now. We should have about 500,000 people that are playing our games on our platform right now, all live numbers. We've got exactly 24 games. And the screen on the far left that's the token and the exchange, the prices and the changes of the token prices for all of our games. So, I mean, these are some of the things that we do. We do other things. We do DeFi. We do DAOs. We do a whole bunch of other stuff. But generally, because we are rooted as a game company, that's how we started. Everything that we do most of the focus is on games, and everything starts from games. So before I go on, sorry. So going back, I mean, we've got 1,700 people in the company thinking about blockchain and blockchain gaming. And I mean, why are we doing this? As I said, we're really true believers that this technology, as online technology has changed gaming, will change gaming for all of us. I don't think it's going to happen in 2-3 years. It could, but I think we're going to see iterations. We're going to see more evolutions. We're going to see new type of content. And it might take 10 years, 15 years. But I do know that some of you, maybe in 2030 or 2040, are going to look back to this day or the early 2020s and say, hey, yeah, I remember that guy up on stage talking about blockchain technology. And I think he was right. Blockchain technology has changed gaming in ways that we weren't able to fathom. I'm not talking about monumental changes where gameplay is totally different. I'm talking about maybe new ways for pay for content, new ways for you to be able to acknowledge users, new players playing different games because they're part of that ecosystem now instead of just being one, like an external party. So all of that is going to happen. And before I delve in a little more, I'm going to be talking about a couple things because there are a lot of things in the blockchain world that have funky names. So these are some of the words that I work with or I see, and I want to share these words with you today. So all these words, if you know the definition for most of these games, kudos to you. You're better than me. Maybe you should work with us and talk to me after the session. But these are all words that we go through, and I think as people looking at new technology, there's so many things, and a lot of it I feel are very techy. So if you're on the business side or on the game design side, probably don't need to know a lot of this. The only things that I think that's pertinent to this session are two things. One is tokenomics, and one is Web3. I'll talk a little about tokenomics later on, but I do want to give a little explanation or my version of what Web3 is. So, there's a lot of different wordings for Web3, and the way I explain it, or I think it's a better way, or my way, is that Web3 games are games that give tangible acknowledgement to the users who put in their resources into playing that game. So if you're a user and you're committing time, maybe it's money, it's maybe your skills, maybe you're not playing the game, you're a Twitch fan, or you're just on the community, you just like chatting with people, and you don't actually play the game. I mean, you've invested a certain amount of your resources into the game, and right now you're acknowledged within that community. That's great, but that's all that it is. The key word here in my definition is that it's tangible, meaning it's not, hey, good job, pat on the back. Or, I mean, badges are good. I mean, you get your badge, you go to your site, you log into your game, you got that acknowledgement, that's good. But besides that, there are other more tangible ways. So tokenomics, I'll talk about a little more later. I'll show you some of the games that are on our platform. So we've got RPGs, we've got farm games, we've recently launched the social casino game. We've got match 3 games, we've got card games. I mean, out of the 24 games, we have a healthy mixture. I'd say about half would be RPGs, and then we've got a whole bunch of other games. I mean, you can just come to our site and check out the games that we have. Okay. So, I mean, I don't know if you can tell by some of these images, but they're not, pure Web3 games. I mean, a lot of companies or a lot of people think of Web3 and they think of, well, maybe Axie or some other type of games where, I mean, it's not your more traditional games. The difference of on the games on our platform are that all of our games, or most of our games on our platform right now they started out as Web2 games, regular games, PC, mobile games that you could download from the App Store or Google Play. But we added a Web3 component to it, which is the Web3 component being tokenomics. And we added the tokenomics part of it and made them into Web3. And so now we've got these 24 games. So most of our games don't have NFTs. And I know a lot of you are thinking, what do you mean? I mean, Web3 games, NFTs, isn't that a prerequisite? And it's actually not. It's like a component. You can have it if you want it, but if your gameplay or the game design doesn't support that, you can try to like squeeze it in there, but it's going to be awkward, and it's not going to work. The games where we do have NFTs, we've got a couple of games, are NFTs that we have not sold as a company. We have not sold any games NFTs in our companies. These are NFTs that gamers have played our games, and after a certain stage, they realize they've got something, and they want to mint this character as an NFT. And so they do it, and they sell it to other users if they want it, or they keep it themselves. So Wemade has not made a dime off selling NFTs. So I think that's a little different strategy that we're approaching, where we're not selling NFTs for $5,000 or $30,000. I know friends who work at other game companies. Just yesterday, he was telling me, and this was when the market was really good, he sold an NFT, a couple of NFTs, it was land, by the way, for $700,000 at that time. And with the land, you can sublease it, you can get some taxes off it. And so he sold it for $700,000. The game's coming out in 2.5 years from now. When he sold it, it was 3.5 years out. So people paying that amount of money for your NFTs in your game, it's a good story. I mean, who doesn't want to earn $500,000 or $700,000 selling basically artwork in a game that's not been developed yet? But they did it. He's happy with it. But it is a burden. It's a cost on your balance sheet that you want for your users, because they're expecting that much value. And so I think users, when they buy something off you early on through NFTs at that price, they're not true gamers. They could be true gamers, but there's another section where they're more investors. They're more financially motivated, which does bring gameplay into a different. You start looking at it from a different perspective. I'm not saying it's good or bad, because you do have motivated financial investors that are more active. They're being evangelists. But that doesn't necessarily make the game fun. And so our approach has been a little different. We don't sell NFTs. Just last week, we did have 1,000 of our users in this game, which we haven't launched yet. This Anypang, that's a very casual match 3 game. We had the top 1,000 users from that community come to our site, be able to mint their NFTs. I mean, we didn't make any. It was all free for the first 1,000 people. And I saw prices go up, maybe 0.3, 0.4 ETH. So I mean, the people that come to our site are fans of our game. They're playing, they're making some money. we're not doing it, and the goal is that we want people, users, to feel like, hey, I'm playing that game, I'm getting some value out of it, instead of us getting the value from the gaming community. So I've talked a little about tokenomics. I've used that word, and tokenomics, this is the Wikipedia version. I have a hard time understanding, but basically the way I frame it is it's designing an economic system within the game that has a strong correlation with the crypto that's created and or used within the game. So it brings another layer of something into your Web 2 games. So you've got a game that's functioning, you've got good balance in the game. With Web 3, with bringing on tokenomics, you're able to create some sort of value, usually with tokens. It could be NFTs, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. A lot of games are not suitable or not very well fit with NFTs, so all of our games have a tokenomics layer, a cryptocurrency there. And creating supply and also creating demand, that's what tokenomics is. And so that's the definition. And when tokenomics started, where Web3 games started, what, 3-4 years ago? Or I guess even longer, we had earlier versions. They were very simple. You needed an NFT. You need to pay for it upfront. And the more you played and the more people came on, you were able to sell your NFTs or keep your NFTs in hopes of selling it later on. And that model, I think, has changed in the last couple of years. I mean, this industry is changing really quickly, not just the technology, but the evolution of the business model. And so this is my sort of like way how I see Web3 tokenomics changing, evolving. So the first generation are low-quality games. When I say low quality, I don't mean they're bad games. Well, I am saying they're bad games. They're not games you play for fun. A lot of it is NFT focused, or I'd say everything was NFT focused. And the users, or the players that are supposed to be playing, were the early users for the first generation were investors, and then the later users were the financially motivated gamers. And the financially motivated gamers start playing these games because they realized, hey, I can make some money. And that was how you did UA back then with these games. And so a lot of games that we've heard about have done incredibly well. They've gotten millions and millions and millions of users because they were able to attract financially motivated gamers or just financially motivated people. And I mean, who's not financially motivated? I mean, we all are. So I mean, I don't think it's bad. It's just that maybe that model was not a sustainable model because, I mean, come on, playing games and making $5,000 a month, I mean, the math just doesn't work out with anything. So the second generation of tokenomics that I've seen are developers, when they saw the first generation, they were like, hey, I can make a better game than that. That game's crappy. The design sucks, artwork sucks, so I don't understand the tokenomics part of it as well as these guys, but I'm going to take their tokenomics. I'm going to bring my practice of making better games, and I'm going to go into the Web3 space. So obviously, you had better games, a little more fun to play, but still a lot of the game design on the tokenomics was based on the first generation where there was a financial incentive. And now you didn't need an NFT to play. You can just hop in the game. But if you want to get any meaningful progress or do more, you needed to buy something within the game. And without that NFT, you'd be a lower tier gamer, and you weren't able to make any money. And because the game wasn't fun, I mean, that didn't work out for you. The third generation, and I think I've been seeing this maybe since last year, I think the second generation, the developers have seen that, hey, the second generation of tokenomic games have not really worked. And they're like, OK, I'm going to focus on gameplay. And so I think in the last year or so, we've talked to a lot of developers wanting to make good games. And these are, if there wasn't a Web3 label to it, it could be a very decent Web2 game. But they wanted to add tokenomics, which is great. But tokenomics is, I don't want to say it's an art, but it's a living thing. So it's very, very difficult to get right. And we've launched 24 games, and I can probably say we've failed on 20 of them. We've done horribly. I mean, we could have done a lot better. There's a couple of games that are doing decently well, but only time will tell how sustainable that tokenomic model is going to be. And because on the third generation side, because the games, it's a bit more fun. There's good gameplay. I think there are users that are just playing the game. And then there's another layer of gamers that want to cater to the users that are just playing for fun. And they're grinding, they're playing the games so that they create some value which they can give or sell or have other hardcore gamers buy. So if you're a developer in Web3 right now, and if your team, if you're on the game design side, and if you have selling NFTs as the main business model, I would say maybe you'd want to think about that again or tweak that model, because there's nothing wrong with selling NFTs. But if that's the main source of revenue, or if you think that's how your company's going to make it big, it's an old model. It could have worked 3 years ago, but I feel the consumers are much smarter, and they've seen better. And by the time your game comes out, you'll see other developers with much better games that don't require an NFT. So you'll be just pushed out of the market because of competition. So I want you to think about that. After tokenomics, I'm going to share with you some examples of some of the games that we've launched, the tokenomics of the game. So this is I'm going to show you 6 examples of tokenomics. I'm not going to go into the details of tokenomics. This is a pretty stripped down version. I mean, there's no real magic secret sauce that you're going to be able to take from these slides. I mean, sorry, I don't have that much information, but what I'm trying to show you is that different games have different tokenomics. There's some components that are the same in each game. There's, that supply, there's that demand. And, how you design your game it's just without the tokenomics part, just the in-game economy of the game should be really correlated with the tokenomics part. So even if you have very similar RPGs, you might have totally different tokenomics. So case A, case B, you can see we sort of think about it from the light user version, hardcore user. Oh, and by the way, we're a platform. We also develop our own games. So out of the 24 games on our platform, there's a couple games that are under the Wemade group. But there's more games that are third party. So what we do is when developers come to us, say, hey, I want to use your technology and make a Web3 game, we look at their game, we advise them on the tokenomics design, which we think might fit their game. Obviously, we don't know their game as well as they do. So they take that basic blueprint that we give them, they put it over their game and see if it works or not. And they make tweaks, they make changes and see if that model works for them. And they get back to us, maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks, a month, and they say, hey, we've looked at your blueprint. We think this is going to fit better in our games if we change it this way. And so we go back and forth. And so the guys on my team, I have biz dev guys working with developers, but once they're on board, I have a separate team that consults tokenomics with the individual game. And I'm hoping with, after a couple of years from now, tokenomics is going to be just good game design. So most developers should have a good understanding of it. So we're not going to be doing tokenomics design for games 10 years down the road. You should be able to do it on your own. But till we get to that point, and because we have a lot more experience, we've failed miserably, we've seen a lot of mistakes, I think we'll be able to help you make less or none of those mistakes. Notice I said none of those mistakes. There will probably be new mistakes that you're going to make and that we're not going to be able to see, but we're going to learn. And as a group, the 1,700 people in our company, I feel like we probably have a deeper understanding of what doesn't work and what might work a little better. So I think that's where our edge is. So yeah, case A, case B, and case C, D, and F are all RPGs. One thing that I think is notable is case F, which is one of our more recent games. So you know how people talk about Web3, you bring value out, you bring it to another game, you bring your, your gun from your Web3 shooter game into another Web3 medieval fantasy game. We all know that's not going to work. There's so many barriers. There's so many things that needs to be solved. I mean, developers, the tech stack, the engine, the game balance. A lot of things I can see in some instances where it could work. In a lot of cases, it's not going to be very easy. You're going to need the developers talking with the other developers, and there's just going to be, we don't have the right protocols or like a similar understanding of what we can do with that potential, so I think it's going to be hard. But Case F is a game that we launched recently, and what we did with this game, this was a sequel, and so it was a franchise. So we had Game A. We launched that game a couple of years, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago or so. And in that game, this game we launched, and you're playing the game, you're earning, you're grinding, you're getting something, you get something of value, and you can sell it out on the open market, which open as in we have a decentralized exchange, and so you can sell it there. You can make I don't know, maybe $10 to $50 a month. It depends how much you grind. But you're not going to get rich playing your games. There's some value there. You can buy yourself and your girlfriend a nice dinner maybe. But you're not going to be able to pay for college. But there's some value there. But you can sell it, or you can take that and you can put it into a. I don't like the word staking because it doesn't sound very legit. But I can't think of a better word. But you take that coin or that asset, and you put it in with another asset, which is coin B, and then you get coin C. So it's like, okay, so what's the big deal? The good thing is, or the interesting thing is, coin B comes from that game that we launched 2.5 years ago. So if you're a light user, you don't need coin B or coin C. If you want coin C, you can get some of that assets off the market. You can buy it from other users through our exchange. Or if you're a player in this game, and because it's a franchise, you're like, hey, I like playing this game. I want to play this new game, but I've got assets here. Oh, I don't have to start off from scratch. I do have to start from level 1, but once you build up to a certain level, the assets you've built on this first game will give you a certain amount of, will give you access to new content or things that other people that don't have. Other people can still buy it. They can buy it off our exchange, but if you don't want to buy and you've accrued that asset in your game, in the first game, you bring it, and then you can have a different or a better game experience. So I think less about selling NFTs or bringing your gun over to, or your sword over to another game, but you're actually bringing coins or tokens from game A to game B. And so I think we'll see more examples of this. And this has worked for us because these are internal studios that they're two different studios, totally different. They run differently. They've got different heads. But the reason we did this is we believe in Web3, and I think there's a lot of things that we can do. And also because in the case of this game, Game B, the later launched game, they were like, hey, wait a minute. That Game A has X amount of users already, and there's 250,000 wallets, people with that currency in their game. If we were able to bring them to our games, hey, that'd be cool. So it wasn't an altruistic love kind of thing. Yeah, we'll do it for all your games. But the producer for Game B realized, hey, there could be potential tangible benefits for him and his team. And so they did that. And so what happened with Game A was the original game, we have more users actually playing Game A as well, because when we marketed Game B and they started playing, they realized, oh yeah, I do have some assets in Game A that I've played a couple years back. And so they log into their game, and they're like, maybe they want to bring some of that over, or they're like, hey, this is fun. I'm going to play my game as well. So generally, it was healthy for the whole the franchise. And I see this. I don't think a lot of companies are doing this. Every time we go out, we buy the $80, GTA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, FIFA 99 to 2080. You're starting over fresh. There's very, very little, except maybe the joystick control, the dexterity that you have. Besides this dexterity, what are you really getting out? Not a lot. It's fun, but with blockchain technology, I think there are things that you can design your game differently than if there wasn't any blockchain technology. And as I said, we're still early. This is just one version, one iteration, and we're going to be doing a lot of these things and see where we end up. So I talked a little about our game design. I'm going to talk a little about, I think, some things that you guys might be more interested. So I'm going to talk a little about supply and demand of our coins for different games and how prices have fared. Just as a caveat, a disclaimer, there's so many things influencing token prices that are not within the game. You've got general economic issues. You've got how, when crypto changes, we see a lot of correlation within our games that have nothing to do with, well, the prices of those tokens that have nothing to do with Bitcoin or ETH, but there is some correlation. So these things aren't an exact match, but I want you to just look at some of the examples, get an understanding. So in game type A, Supply, it's the yellow line. So in the first couple months, 2-3 months, a lot of supply. We had some trading volume, and there's demand, but it's very difficult to actually measure demand because the sinks within the game are very wide. So it's an easier metric is seeing how much trading there is within that token in our DEX. So you see the trading volume, and so you see this big gap here where there's a lot more supply, and this is what happens. And this graph is probably the most common graph that I think a lot of Web3 developers have seen in their games, so very common. Type B, a little different. We've sort of spaced out the supply demand, the supply amount. So they come out slower, and trading volume was lower. And you can do several things. I mean, you design the game where you can actually start creating maybe tokens or some assets within the game early on, maybe after the first hour or even after the first 10 days. One of our examples is when we first started, we wanted people to be able to mine tokens later than earlier. So you had to play for 5 to 10 days. And after you've played, if you wanted to, you can mine those tokens. And if you wanted to, you can get some value. I mean, you didn't have to sell it, that wasn't the whole point. But if you wanted to, you can get those tokens. And we made it so that you got those tokens later on after you've sort of you've been involved with the game. And so you look at this graph. What we've done is, well, in this game, we've made it so that the demand for those tokens, the tokens that are created in day 1 or day 5, you would need these tokens at level 70 or level 80. So the trading volume wasn't there because nobody was buying these new coins because they weren't necessary for the first couple of weeks or couple of months for regular players. And so this also led to more supply and demand trailing. So another drop in coin price. Not very different with game C, with game type C. But what I do want to point out was this game was interesting because a couple months out into the game, I was like 6-7 months into the game, we made changes to the tokenomics. We actually added one new thing, and with that new thing, we saw token prices go up, and you can see trading volume go up, and the prices were up, I think, about twice, a little more than twice of what it originally was before we changed that tokenomics, and it was there for about 3 months. It's gone back now, but I mean, you can't really see it here, but it's still higher than what it was before we made that change. And the concurrent numbers for these games, for this game here, hasn't changed a lot. So we feel like what we did with the tokenomics for that game actually made some decent changes, and we were able to learn some things. And so when we talk with developers, and this is an RPG, by the way, we say, hey, we did this for game Y. If you want to think about doing this for your game, you can do it from the get-go, or maybe 3 months down the road, when you want to add some new content or do something, you can add this component to your tokenomics, and you'll see some change in how gamers play your game. The last type that I want to share is game type D. So if you look at game type A, B, and C, you can see that the trading volume is even or not higher than the supply, right? Because, I mean, how could you have more trading than the amount of the tokens that were created? Well, technically you can. I mean, you can have a couple of people trading back and forth. You can see that. But generally, it follows the same pattern. It's a similar supply and trading volume. But with game D, supply was really low. And we had trading volume starting at really high. And there's a lot of volume. And I'll talk a little about this. And so for this game, we've only launched this. This was the 6th game that I showed where we had the 2 tokens. So you can see the prices, doesn't fluctuate as much. And it's not only because of this supply and demand or the 2 tokens. There are other factors. I mean, it really is a well-designed game. But we made this graph. And the reason we were able to do this is not because we actually because with low supply, how can you get that big delta in the trading volume? It's because we created a sizable swap pool. Before we had on our DEX, it was just trading. It was an order book method where buyers and sellers had to match, so it was very supply and demand. But with this model, we created a liquidity pool where we put in actually a lot of money or a lot of coins so that people that even if the coins weren't made within the game by other users, we created a supply for it. And because the game was designed where the demand for the tokens were there early on, that kept the machine running. And I think that was a big factor in our coin prices being more stable. Okay. So there's a couple things that we learned out of the 24 games that we've launched. It's tough to design good tokenomics. It really is. It's a living thing. I mean, when I look at the news and I see Jerome Powell making these things, so we're going to change our rates, the Fed is doing this, who's doing that, I feel like, yay, man, our game designers in our 24 games are doing the same thing every week with their games on a smaller scale, but they are doing similar things because there's supply and demand, there's a lot of things that they're looking at. But we found out that having a beautiful token graph be sustainable it's tough. I don't know if anybody has done a great job. I think we're getting closer, we're doing better and better, but we still have some ways to go. Second thing, you think making supply is a good thing, having a lot of supply, but then you run the risk of, obviously, price going down. Another way to think of that is if you have good enough sinks, if you design your game well enough where you can actually, even though there's a lot of supply, if you can create good sinks within the game, the actual gameplay, the amount of supply doesn't really matter. So I think some of our graphs, you saw supply going up. The trading volume wasn't there. The prices went down because the game wasn't able to support that amount of coins being created or that much of value being created. So if you can go back and tweak your games, I think it's definitely doable. In the earlier graphs, what we did, because we saw so much supply, all right, we're going to restrict supply. We did that early on, and what that did was there weren't enough tokens that were being used by higher level hardcore players, so they weren't able to level up as fast, and it wasn't fun for them. So they dropped the game, so the game died pretty early on. So to get coin prices up, you can restrict supply, and you'll have a good coin price. But because the volume is going to be low, which will lead to high volatility, it's not a good model for your game. Number 4, really look at the metrics. As a platform, we have access, or we can look at how the token supply and demand of tokens and the graphs that we showed you. But because we're a platform, we don't have access to the actual games from third-party developers. They look at their numbers. So if you're a developer and you want to do Web3 stuff, and you can work with companies like us, and you can see how tokens are traded, the volume, but you got to look at your metrics within the game to see how that's all working. I think this is probably going to be, I think years back when user acquisition was a big thing, you'd spend $500,000, you'd pay somebody $100,000 a year, or somebody right out of college, because if they could tweak that $500,000 and get 10% better ROI, it's worth their paycheck. I think we're going to see some of that in games. So I think there's a lot of more analytics that's going to be needed. And finally, good tokenomics don't save bad games. If you've got a crappy game, just leave it there. Adding this is probably not going to help you too much. It will sustain your game. Maybe you can breathe a little more life into it. But unless you make changes in that window frame, just praying is not going to work. Okay, so I've talked about tokenomics, Web3, and some of the things that we've learned. I've shown you our graphs. These are some of the things that we're facing right now. And I talk about these things because I feel like we've made a lot of mistakes. We're further along the curve. So we're thinking about things that other companies aren't thinking about yet because we're facing these issues right now. And I share these because I think some of you will probably have similar issues, and you can know that, hey, Juan said that they've thought about this or they're going through this. So you can reach out to us if you have any questions. So we're talking with devs now that have launched on other chains, and they realize it's not working for them. Just because you're on a particular chain doesn't mean you're going to get a lot of users or you're going to have good users. That chain is just the technology. And that technology stack is only going to get you so far. Faster transaction, maybe it's lighter, but users don't care about that. So if you're on a big chain, doesn't mean you're going to get a lot of users. A lot of developers make this mistake. So now we're talking with a lot of those developers saying, hey, we see that on your platform, you've got gamers. I mean, it's not about the technology. We don't tout our technology as the best because really does not matter that much. But because we have a strong user base, if you bring your game on our platform, you can get something besides the technology. So we're thinking about how to design or implement games that are on different chains. Also games that have launched, that have, we have, I don't know, maybe DAUs of 100, 200. So the game is not sustainable. They're not able to pay for the server costs. So what do you do with games in that situation? What do you do with the NFTs, if there are any? What do you do with the tokens? What do you do with the users? Because, I mean, the promise of Web3 was do something, this is never going to die, this is with you for the rest of your life. And we're realizing that's BS. I mean, if your game, there's only value if that game is still alive, if the servers are running. Because the way a lot of the NFTs are structured are, and I don't know if you've experienced this, is an NFT is an image, but that image is pulled from a URL. So once you don't have that URL or that server's down, it's not going to be able to call on that asset. And so there's nothing there. There's no image. So we're like, how do we work with developers that have launched their games on our platform? And it's their game, but they're telling us, OK, we want to shut it down. And we're like, that's fine. We're a platform. We're OK. But what are you going to do? What are you going to say to your users? They spent time. These are issues that we're working on. I think we found a couple of ideas or a couple of ways we can mitigate some of that risk or help users feel better. So, and also one of the things we're looking at now is how do we use a single coin in multiple games? In that previous example, we were using 2 different coins in one single game. The other part, what I'm talking about now, is how do we have one token? And maybe the tokenomics for this game, because it's too simple, it's not easy to design the tokenomics very detailed. It's a very simple game. So can we have one token that's utilized by 10, 20, 30 different games? How do you do supply and demand? How do you do the tokenomics and the balancing between all these games? So those are some of the things that we're thinking about. OK, I think I've got about 13 minutes left. And so before I finish, I want to show you some of the progress we've made last year. So last year, GDC, this is where we're at. At that time, we've signed about 25 games. We had 7 games that were live, 3 genres that we were on mobile only. A year later, today, we've signed 100 games. We have 24 games that are live. Diverse genres, a lot more genres, multiple platforms, and we're working with different partners. My goal is to come here next GDC, and hopefully if you come back next year and say, hey, Juan, I remember your session, I was there, let me know, I'll give you free swag or something. But at that time, I want to be able to say, hey, these are the experience that we've learned after launching 100 or 200 games. So that's the pace that we're working on, the 1,700 people in the company. This is all we do. So hopefully, next time you'll bring your friend and make it even more crowded so that they can have a better understanding of what we've learned at Web3. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, this is my email. You can email me. If I can't get back to you, I'll make sure somebody within the company get back to you with some of the questions that you might have. All right, thank you, everybody. If there are any questions, there's like 10 minutes left. I can probably answer 2 or 3. If anybody have questions, please feel free to ask now or come up when you're done. If you feel shy about it. Oh, there are 2 gentlemen there. Yeah.
So hello, I have a question regarding. So I really liked your presentation. I want to say that because a lot of people come and say like, make your NFTs, sell your NFTs, do rug pulls, get rich, but this was like real. So thanks for that. But if we look at EVE Online, for example, which is economic simulator 101. What EVE Online does, for example, is just allow you to cash out ISK, sell it for money, and then just move your money to somewhere else. So what would be the advantage of your awesome slide with token A, token B going to token C and moving tokens around? how would that, I understand from a game perspective and how you can drive users around and such, but would that be an advantage for the user? Why would I want to just move things around, convert things around, except the staking? Because I would assume that would be probably because you would do some pools and they would allow for balancing and it would give you some money and so on. So it would allow you to earn some money on your money, which is cool because you get interest. But why just not cash out the money and move your money from game A to game B?
You could do that, and I hear that example a lot, and I think EVE Online is a great example. I say this because EVE Online, old game, I mean, there's still a lot of hardcore people playing, and some of those items within the game, they're worth a lot. And when I look at EVE Online, I say, man, they've designed their games. They didn't have tokenomics in mind, but they really designed a good game, in-game economy within their game, even before tokenomics were there. So in situations like that, I feel like, yeah, they probably might not be able to benefit with that one single game maybe because they've designed it really well. But I think there are some values they can still have. So because it's really well designed, actually adding another layer of tokenomics is probably not very difficult because they've designed their system very well. And if you put a layer of Web3 on it, I think there are other extrinsic value. And maybe it's not as much as some other games because they really do have a robust community and there is a decent marketplace. But I'm a believer. It's not going to harm it to add tokenomics to it, and there are only benefits. Maybe that benefit is an extra 1% in revenue or user commitment. It could be another 50%. I don't know. But there's nothing wrong or there's no downside to it. So even the EVE Online guys, if I met them today, I'd say, you guys already have something that's really applicable. Why not do this? Because I think if you sell your assets and you get it for money, that's okay, that's fine too. But if you're a true gamer or if you like games, having that badge of honor saying, hey, I made this and I own this as an NFT, I think there's some bragging rights there, which I think could rejuvenate the community. But EVE Online is a great game where I feel like they might not need it at this point in time if they're just working on that one game. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I think you said something at the beginning which I really agree with, which is the fact that using NFT primary sales as your main source of revenue is not going to cut it for the future. What would you say are the other models that you see being emergent or being something more sustainable for new Web3 games?
I think there's in-app purchases or different payment, like fiat payments. So like if you've designed your game, and all the tokenomics, the games that I'm talking about, you need to have a free-to-play microtransaction model. Or that's got to be possible. You can bring old Diablo back, Diablo 2, and if you add tokenomics and with the blockchain technology, you're able to move that asset in and out of the game or do some of that, it's possible. The way that dev studios should be looking at it is NFT sales, there's nothing wrong with it, but are sort of like nice ways to reward your users for being part of that community. And we were thinking about selling 1,000 NFTs for one of our casual games. We were thinking about selling for $20 a piece, and whatever the market fetches, good for the users who bought it. But we decided we don't need to make $20 off our players. If they're true fans, they can just mint it for free. And so those are decisions that we make. But in that game, we had other in-app purchase models. You can pay with your credit card. You can buy other items. And this goes back to designing your tokenomics in correlation with your in-game economics, so that there's a balance. And some developers say, we're going to go very heavy with NFTs or tokenomics, and we're going to get very small in-app purchase or fiat revenue. You can balance that out, and it depends on your game. Yeah.
Just very quickly, would you say secondary sales can also be a primary revenue generator for
I think so.
Or?
I think so. I really do think so. And some games are designed that way. Yeah. I guess 2 more questions. Yes.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for sharing some of the numbers behind the games that you guys have. I have a question about just onboarding onto the Web3 platform in general, because what we're seeing is that there are a lot of lingos and jargons, right? Like, how do you educate people who are new to Web3 to just feel comfortable in the platform? Because it seems like you guys are able to do that pretty successfully with a lot of active players. Are there any lessons learned there for onboarding?
It is complicated, and I think a lot of the Web3 companies make it even more complicated. They use jargon, as you said, that sounds really cool, like, oh, ours is a sidechain. No, ours is a L2. What's the difference between a sidechain and an L-chain? Do you know? I mean, at the end of it, I don't think that really matters. So in our case, we have an SDK where you integrate our SDK. Of course, we help you on designing your tokenomics, but once that's done, you integrate our SDK, and with that, you don't need to know 80 or 90% of those words that I put out there, because we create the swap pools for you, or we create the system. We do it in different ways, and we do this for the entire ecosystem. So developers who are developing games, of course, they need to understand tokenomics and how that all works, but actually understanding the technology behind it, it shouldn't be that difficult to do. And so that's our goal, trying to make it easy. So I think we'll see that 5 years from now, nobody's going to be talking about some of these, since last year, what's zero knowledge? It's like zero knowledge roll up. We don't need to know that. Yeah. Yes. Final question of the day.
I have two questions related. One is you said you started with 25. And now you have 100. So I'm assuming a lot of those other companies are not your games, right? So we do have some games in other platforms like Polygon and Icon. So is your technology agnostic to blockchain platform? And the other one is, if we port our games into your system, do we I guess, benefit from your tokenomics?
So thank you. That were the two final questions of the day. But I think both of them are relevant to what I've talked about when I said we're looking at different ways to bring games from different chains, the multi-chain question that we have. We have two basic templates that we think are going to work. So we're going to implement one of these in a game that's going to be shown on our booth today. And that game was launched using the BNB chain, and they've launched, and they realized, well, I guess what you've realized with Polygon, hey, maybe it's not sustainable just working on this chain. There's not enough users, or it's not as big as you want it to be. So coming on our platform, the easy way is create two different builds. It's a totally different game. But I'm assuming on your white paper you haven't said that. So a lot of developers are like, well, we've promised this to our community, and so we don't want to go on our promise. We don't want to split the user base in half because we only have 500 users. I mean, we don't want to split that to 250. And so we get that. So we're trying to find ways. And to your question, do we have an answer that I think is a strong answer? I'd like to say, I'd like to look at your games because of the two models that we think that'll work. One might be applicable, or maybe your game requires another template, which we're happy to think about. But I do see a lot of this questions going multi-chain on different platforms, trying to come in our platform or other platforms. So I think we'll be learning a lot about this in the next couple of months. Feel free to reach out to us after this talk.
And then the tokenomics?
Oh, yeah. And so the tokenomics part, as I said, I mean, you got to look at your game and say, hey, is there something right with your original game? And if you don't need to change the tokenomics a bit because it's a well-working model, that's great. We can just copy paste or just tweak that a bit. But if you found out that it doesn't work, maybe you were one of the first or second generation where it's very heavily NFT focused, and you want to change that, that's not just tokenomics. You got to change a lot of stuff within your game. The in-game economy of how users interact within the game with just the assets within the game, regardless of the tokens. You have to fix that or work with that in tandem with creating a new tokenomics. So I don't think we can give you the magic answer with tokenomics. We have a lot more experience. So I can say this hands down that whoever you've worked with, Polygon, Immutable, Solana, whoever it is, they will not be able to tell you more about your tokenomics than we can because we have just made a lot more mistakes. We've done a lot of this hands-on. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Good presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming.